Hi, good morning, namaste. How are
but he is a well-known intellectual of Nepal also, Dr. Bhattarai.
Good morning, friends. In fact, I would like to thank the organizers of this very important international conference on constitution making in Nepal. As you all know, we are passing through a very historic transition period in Nepal. Though most of you who have come from the developed world would know you have passed this phase almost 100 years back. You have stabilized democracy, you have a stable form of government, but in most of the third world countries, we had to complete our democratic revolution only recently, and Nepal is still going through that process. Our democratic revolutionary process is still not complete. We want to complete and institutionalize through making of this new constitution. So this period is very important for Nepal, and as is mentioned here, post-conflict scenario, but I would like slightly mend these words. Instead of saying post-conflict, it would be better to say post-revolutionary scenario, because we are trying to complete this revolution, democratic revolution, and want to institutionalize this revolution and democracy through the constitution making process. So this meeting is very important for us, and I'm happy very well-known experts from different parts of the world have participated, and in this uh, current meeting in this morning, very well-known personalities from Canada, Finland, Sri Lanka are participating, and there will be commentators from Nepal. I hope this session will be very useful. Now, without saying much, I would ask Honorable Bob Ray to make his presentation.
I had the pleasure of being here a little over 2 years ago with Professor Yash Gai and a few other people who are also here again today in talking at that time about the issue of federalism. It's a great privilege for all of us from outside Nepal to be part of this process over the weekend. I feel a certain degree of tension in my comments because on the one hand, I feel very strongly that the decisions about the constitutional questions which are still being considered are questions to be decided by the Constituent Assembly and by the people of Nepal themselves. And they are not issues to be decided by outsiders. Democracy is not something that can be exported. Democracy is not an exercise in imperialism. Each country has to find its own path to its constitutional future. And so I feel very strongly that I am not here to tell people what to do. On the other hand, as the President said yesterday, those of us who've come from outside have flown halfway around the world. And so I can only tell you I didn't fly halfway around the world to say nothing. So I'm here to say something. And I hope that you will take it all in a democratic spirit, in a fraternal spirit, in a spirit of dialogue. and in a spirit of even argument. Because those who know me from Canada will know that argument is something that I make a living at, so I don't mind doing it here. But I can assure you I don't make these arguments out of any sense that I have somehow, because of the experiences that I've had, have some kind of an advantage over the people who themselves here are making the Constitution. I've been asked to speak about this morning, we're talking about the question of the so-called form of government, that is to say, should democracy take the form of a presidential system or should it take the form of a parliamentary system? And when I was talking with a friend who's here about the fact that this was going to be the subject of my presentation as opposed to the federal issue, which is something that I've talked about in the past, he said to me, well, you're going to be able to make everyone in the room unhappy no matter what you say. I've certainly been following the debates and following the issues and following the positions of the parties, and I've taken due note of all of those things. And so what I'm about to say is not necessarily going to make everyone happy. Trying to look at this issue in a slightly historical context, it's fair to say that it was the American Revolution which gave rise to the notion that there were a variety of forms of liberal government, not democratic government, because in the 18th century the United States was not a democracy, and neither was the United Kingdom was not a democracy. Both countries were essentially liberal in their institutions, but they were not democratic. And so the existence of the presidential model, which dominated in the which took hold in the United States in 1787, and which then was widely shared throughout the Americas as the essential model. Simón Bolívar, the great leader of the South American Revolution in the early 19th century, and all of the constitutions of those countries throughout the Americas adopted and adapted the American system, which essentially is a powerful president popularly elected through a popular election, who is in charge of the executive, the legislative branch, which is in a Congress, which is either unicameral or bicameral, depending on whether the country is federal or not, and then a judicial system which is based on the principle of the independence of the judiciary. So the basis of that system is essentially based on the notion that there will be a balance of powers between the three, and in theory, that it is in that balance that there are so-called checks and balances between the three, which gives rise to the presidential system. So that's the presidential system on the one hand. On the other hand, we have the Westminster model, which has evolved over generations from the British parliamentary system, and which is now widely shared throughout the Commonwealth of Nations, and is widely shared now in Europe, and which is in play, if you like, in Asia and Africa, where, as our chairman has said, many countries are going through a democratic revolutionary process which is producing new constitutions. So, which system is best? Is there an easy or quick answer to the question? And the answer, of course, is no. There are risks and disadvantages to both systems, as we can see from looking at how these systems are at work and at play, both by using our historical knowledge and by looking at the current situation around the world. By looking at our historical knowledge, we can say that the risk in a presidential system, and I know my good friend Rohan, with whom I've worked for many years in Sri Lanka, will be talking about this in some detail. But the risk of the presidential system was first experienced in Latin America, where you had emerging what I would call a caudillo system of the president, where the president assumed powers which became imperial in nature, dictatorial in nature, and which drew very much on the president as a kind of elected king. Now, knowing a little bit about Nepal, I'm not going to say anything more about the monarchy than what I've just said, except to say that the risk in a presidential system is that power accumulates around the executive, that the executive power that's in the presidency infects all the other parts of the system, and that through his leadership of a political party or a political movement, the president assumes control over the military, assumes control over the entire executive branch of government, but also assumes substantial control over the legislative as well as over the judiciary. And that, of course, is the classic definition of a dictatorship, is where one leader has control of all the functions which we have described: the security function, the military function, the executive managerial function, the legislative function, and the judicial function. And in the modern state, we talk about the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, but we have to talk about the security and military functions as being particular aspects of the executive branch, which give extraordinary power and control over in the hands of the presidency. And when one considers the technological revolution, we realize the implications of this, because literally the security apparatus of the state can listen to everything you're saying, can intervene in all of your private business, can be the controlling of the military, controlling of the police, and able therefore to control people's lives in the most brutal fashion. The parliamentary system has evolved in a different way, and there will be many chances for people to discuss here today the various elements in the parliamentary system which have which need to be discussed. The question of representation, the question of inclusiveness, the question of the electoral system, first past the post versus proportional representation, the issue of how Parliament itself functions, the extent to which power is unilaterally controlled by the Prime Minister, and of course, the question of the functioning of political parties. It's important for us to come back to this question of political parties and how parties operate, because in the practical, real world of democracy, the political parties, of course, are critical and key to the notion of how vital and effective our democracy is. With the arrival of General de Gaulle in France in 1958, with his return to politics, there emerged another model which attempted to combine the presidential and parliamentary systems. Both the Third Republic and the Fourth Republic in France were essentially parliamentary systems with a ceremonial president. General de Gaulle did not come back into politics from exile to become a ceremonial president in 1958. He came back to run the government. And as a president, he insisted on a change of the French Constitution, which change is still in effect in France today, where you have a popularly elected president with significant areas of control, that is to say, foreign affairs, the choosing of the executive, the overall management of the strategic policy of the government, and a Prime Minister and Cabinet who are accountable to Parliament as well as to the President, who are responsible for the day-to-day management of the government. There are many people who have spoken warmly of the French system. I am not one of them, but I would just say that the risks that it runs are that you have, instead of having the best of both worlds, you end up having the worst of both worlds. And that, I think, is something that people need to think about when they look fondly at the French model as the